What terrifying confession has someone told you while intoxicated? Was chilling with an older dude with whom I recently started working as a butcher in a grocery store. A couple of beers down and he starts telling me he's been in prison for 17 years. Came out 2 years ago and it's his first ever job at 64 years old. I got curious and asked him what happened if it wasn't too private. Without hesitation, he simply answered, I cut him down with an axe, this piece of shoot. And now he's a butcher. Dude must really like his job, I guess. LMAO. Showering off my blackout drunk father because he had shoot himself when he started bawling and confessed to being pinned down and sexually assaulted by his brother's friends. This was about 6 months ago now. My brother and I were getting drunk one night because it was the weekend and we just wanted to get fricked up and play video games. We had done plenty of shots and plenty of drinks and we were the definition of fricked up. We were having fun playing some old war zombies for nostalgia, and we paused it to grab some chips. As I was grabbing the salsa, he said to me that he had tried committing suicide about a month prior to this. He had taken some pills and they pumped his stomach and shoot, and he told me the whole time he was thinking of me and how shooty and depressed I'd be if he had died and that he'd never want to lose me. I told him I had also tried committing suicide a while ago and I thought the exact same thing about him. We continued playing zombies while talking about everything under the moon, and we've been talking every day since. Have never missed and will never miss a day. We're both doing a lot better now and we're both in therapy. It's nice having someone to talk to and trust about these things. Had a former friend tell me he killed his brother. Didn't help, this was while we were trying to herd his drunk ass to the car as he was crying and yelling it at the top of his lungs. Amazing we didn't end up in cuffs or the very least get stopped and questioned. Come to find out his brother died of a brain aneurysm and that morning he prayed for something to happen to get him out of school that day. He always blamed himself for his brother's death and I get that to a degree. One time, an old acquaintance, F49, and I, M32, were drinking late into the night. She drank much faster than me, and before long randomly and drunkenly confessed to me the following. When her aging and sick mother, whom she despised and was a ton of unappreciated work to care for, was left in her care, she intentionally withheld certain medications and gave her too much of other ones with the plan being to kill her off. It worked. She told her other siblings that the illness must have finally gotten to her and she passed in her sleep. Since she was already old and sick there was no autopsy. A minute later she snapped out of it and apologized profusely for telling me that, adding that I am the only person she has ever told. Ages back I was helping a blackout drunk co-worker to his apartment, etc. He was needing to be carried 1 second and sprinting across the parking lot the next. As we're getting close to his room he starts breaking down. Why did I hit him? I shouldn't have run etc. Turns out drunk Diego is pretty convinced he hit a kid with his car one day. Sober Diego has no idea what he was talking about. My mum told me she wished she aborted me when I was 8 or 9 or so. She's doing better now after a long struggle with alcoholism. Our relationship is much better and when I told her this a few months ago she hugged me tightly and keeps apologizing to this day. Not brutal or anything, but my mum admitted to breaking confidentiality to find my dad's birth parents despite him pleading not to. She laughed about it and thought it was the funniest thing about how mad my dad was. That was the day I realized my mum doesn't care about others. My brother was drunk and he told me how he got sexually assaulted by our half-brother when he was 8. And that he knew that our half-brother assaulted me too when I was 5. I hadn't ever told my brother about my situation so I was in shock. My uncle said that my grandfather wasn't exactly a caring, loving father because of working in the coal mines. He said my pap was terrified every day because he didn't know if he was coming home or not cause he'd hear the mountains above him crack. Gay man dying of AIDS said I could charge my entire bar tab to his credit card cause he was going to die soon. My ex in college told me once when he was blackout drunk that a few years prior, Him and a bunch of other kids broke into a house to have a party. The family that lived there was on vacation or something and were all gone. I don't know how they picked the house or knew it'd be empty. Sorry. It's been like 12 years, and I forgot some details. They all got drunk and someone decided it would be fun to break a picture on the wall. Then someone else did, too. Eventually it evolved into them all destroying the house. Absolutely everything they could. All the windows were broken. Broke the legs off all the chairs and used them to beat holes into the walls. Ripped and stole clothing. Ripped or burnt all the family photos on the walls and shoot. I don't remember all the stuff he said that they broke, but I remember him crying and saying that they ruined those people's lives and there's no way to make it right. I honestly think he was so freaked up that he doesn't remember telling me, because we never mentioned it again. Anyway, like 2 years later, he punched me in the face for asking for a ride to work one too many times, so I guess he was a piece of shit regardless of current situation or alcohol intake. My grandpa never talked about his Korean War service. He had severe PTSD though. Would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Then one night he came home absolutely shoot-faced, lay down on the couch, then told me that his entire unit had been wiped out before his eyes. He was the sole survivor and got caught behind enemy lines, but made it out. He was their sergeant and blamed himself. He eventually got into veterans therapy in his 60s though. Co-worker told me he killed a dude. The other guy had a bad reputation for being a violent a-hole and made it pretty clear that only one of them would be leaving the room alive. My co-worker decided that he would prefer to be the one who didn't die. He did turn himself in and spent some time in prison. Hanging out with a couple of former roommates 20 or so years ago. One of them mentioned he found young people attractive, then clarified saying very young. Also never once hung out again. Not so much as a confession, but the moment I realized he was seriously messed up. I was living with my parents to help my sick mother. Dad came home absolutely wasted and decided to have a really in-depth conversation with me. Asked about my depression, some traumatic things that had happened to me. He was really listening to me for the first time in my life. I felt seen and heard. We talked about what triggered my depression, suicidal thoughts, etc. He genuinely listened, then just stared me straight in the eyes with the most cruel smile on his face and said, "Now I know. I'm going to push and push and push. We'll see how long it takes until you kill yourself." I moved out the next day. Everyone told me to forget it, forgive it, because he was drunk. I've never stayed with them since, and try to avoid my dad as much as possible. With his previous behaviors, I could see him following through. I had a colleague tell me 20 drinks and she was not only suicidal, but that she had unsuppressed HIV and was knowingly transmitting it to partners she was sleeping with and not telling them, because she didn't care about people. I'm an HIV case manager, so this was absolutely horrific for me. A friend of mine likes to drink a lot, but he knows he has a limit, because when he goes over it he becomes very talkative. He also doesn't date at all, and for a long time we all wondered why. He's a good looking guy, he's really nice, he's fun to be around when he isn't drinking. Anyway, never wants to date. Well, one time he got absolutely shoot-faced and I found out why. It turns out that when we was a kid, he saw his aunt murder his uncle in cold blood. Ever since, he has been terrified of being alone with a woman and feels like he could never truly be safe around them. I scolded a drunk girl because she was trying to shoot up in the bathroom of a strip club. At first, I was pissed because there was blood on the toilet seat. She started crying and said, "It's not my fault. My dad's been shooting me up since I was 10. It was freaking sad and I felt horrible for yelling at her. An old co-worker of mine told me about how him and his friends killed a guy in the 80s who sexually assaulted one of their sisters. He wasn't even drunk. He said they pulled up to his trailer out in the desert, honked the horn, and when the guy came out about 6 guys all opened fire on him. He said that way no one knew exactly who killed him. My uncle told me he was sexually assaulted as a child by an older friend. Explains a lot of his problems. On my birthday I got really wasted drinking at home with friends and let slip my most devastating memory from my time in the military. That's really the source of my PTSD. While in Afghanistan, my unit stumbled upon a stray herd of goats in an area where we regularly met with an informant we knew to be a shepherd. We found a mass of 17 decaying bodies that were the entirety of the man's nomadic clan. It was presumed that the informant was discovered by the Taliban and they put the entire group to death and left them there to rot. I spent the better part of a week burying the bodies. Some were decapitated, including at one child. I think my friends were arguing about Ukraine and I was just so drunkenly frustrated. None of them had seen the terrifying reality of shoot that happens in war. Shoot is just a freaking headline to so many. They didn't tell me this while they were drunk, but I think it fits here. I am a volunteer at a nursing home. When one of the female residents was close to death, she confided it in me this. One time her husband cheated on her with the neighbor's wife. When the neighbor's husband found out, he was very upset and was going to physically hurt her husband. They worked out a deal where the neighbor's husband would not hurt her husband if he was able to return the favor. In essence, her husband agreed to let the neighbor have her in order to save himself a righteous beating. It gets worse. She later became pregnant and told her husband for the rest of his life that it was his, but she honestly believed it to be the neighbor's. Her whole life she was carrying this burden about her son and what her husband had done to her, both with the cheating on her and with the trading her off like a cow. It was truly a heartbreaking conversation.